Welcome aboard the Valley View Ferry. I'm Captain Clayton Embley, and thank you for joining us today on the virtual detour with the Bluegrass Trust. We're going to set sail and teach you some history about the Valley View Ferry.
Hello, my name's Kimberly Campbell, and I'm the chairwoman, the first chairwoman of the Valley View Ferry Authority. I'm here today to discuss a little bit of history that we have had for the Valley View Ferry over the centuries. First of all, the Valley View Ferry was owned and operated by the private landowners here who were basic farmers, farming all kinds of vegetables, probably tobacco, and also were involved in the logging business that was here where the ferry is on the Kentucky River. Back when the days of transportation, the ferry was only regulated by the private entities and would charge a small fee to cross the river so that they could make a living along with their farming and providing for their families. And as the years passed, this became a very large town. The Valley View became a town that was actually bigger than Lexington, Kentucky. Over the years, the town became bigger and also had lots of log money. This was a logging town, and many people do not even know that this was here. Years and years ago, there were multiple logging companies here. There was a town way up on the hill on the other side in Madison County that actually had a nice grocery stores, it had a saloon, it had your feed store, it had a hotel, and many homes. As times changed and things became more modern, they started to dam up the river to prevent the flooding of the lower areas. And when this happened, unfortunately, it caused some of the decline of the business of the logging. Then years and years later, there also was another lock that was built down the river, down past the ferry, which also caused more demise for the little town of Valley View. When there was supply chains, we had the L&N Railroad who came through this area. Across the river on the top of the big columns, there was a railroad at one time that would come into the area, bring its passengers, bring the business to Valley View, but also take all the logs out of this area and take them to where they needed to go to manufacturing plants. Through the years, everything had died away, but as you can see, there are still the columns in the river, and the river there, I think they're meant to stay. They're growing trees, and they've also been in a movie. If y'all ever heard of George C. Scott, there's a great movie called The Flim Flam Man, and he was a con man who came when he was trying to get away from the law and floated across the ferry, and you can see in the background when he's riding the ferry those big railroad columns that we have in the background. And through the years, we have become more and more modernized. We have a ferry that is run by the Coast Guard. It has to be inspected and it has to be certified. We have to have a license, we have to have insurance. All those things are managed and operated by the Valley View Ferry Authority. We have a tugboat that pushes the ferry across, and our barge can hold 3 people. The ride across the river is only about 2 minutes, maybe 3. It all depends on how high the water is and what the current is. If it's a rapid current and we've had high water and there's a lot of debris, the captains have to be very careful to get our passengers across the river. If they're not careful, we could have a problem with our paddle wheel hitting a log and causing some kind of damage to the boat or to the barge, which then could be detrimental to our passengers. We carry many passengers across the river. For years, we had deck crew that were actually inmates because the ferry didn't have very much money, and we needed prisoners who could get out of jail and could come and learn about being a mariner on a boat and also get out and make a little money. That was their occupation for a while. And then we decided that after COVID, that we needed to have our own employees and that we needed to hire our own deck crew so that we could train them. And the goal of Captain Embley has always been that we have trained professional people who go to classes, which we have provided, and sent them to Alabama on occasion to do their mariner training, their water life-saving, and different things so that they understand what a liability they have to make sure that they provide a safe transport across the Kentucky River. I've lived in Lexington since 1984 and I never knew anything about this ferry. It's amazing you can live so close but you don't know the history around you. The Bluegrass area is a fabulous place. Please come and ride our ferry, ride down Tate's Creek, see the beautiful farms, and you will also see the beautiful countryside, especially in the spring when the redbuds and the dogwoods are in full bloom.
Well, I'm actually not a native of Central Kentucky. I'm a native of Savannah, Georgia. My background is a little different. I'm a tanker skipper by training, sailed deep draft ships all over the world. After that, I started docking ships in the port of Norfolk, Virginia. And as my daughter started getting older, I needed to be closer to home. So Valley View Ferry needed a captain, and here I am. I've been with the ferry for about 12 years now. One thing about this ferry, it's the oldest continuously operated ferry in the country, and you're basically a caretaker of history. My big focus here is safety. One screw up, we lose history. So it's critical that we do things safely and efficiently, and that kind of takes precedent over anything that we're doing. From time to time, though, you do see people that are surprised that something like this even still exists. And of course, you are a caretaker of history. You can never forget that, but safety definitely is our primary focus. The ferry is named after the community Valley View, which is on the Madison County side of the river. At one time, Valley View was actually bigger than Lexington. It had a power plant, it had a sawmill, it had a railroad running through the town, it had steamboats lining up against the banks, and the ferry operated amongst all that. The boat you're aboard today is the John Craig II. This hull is about 12 years old. And then we had a previous boat, the John Craig, that served the ferry for about 30 years. And the people say, well, why the name John Craig? This ferry originally was started by a fellow named John Craig who got a perpetual and irrevocable grant back in 1785 to operate a ferry here, and it's operated continuously since then. Ulysses S. Grant, Daniel Boone, a lot of the history makers in Kentucky have used this ferry. It was in the about 2000 that the ferry went from private ownership to ownership by Jessamine, Fayette, and Madison counties. We're funded by the 3 counties and the State Transportation Cabinet. We're basically a quasi-government organization. People don't realize this, we're actually 2 boats. We're a ferry barge and we're a towboat. The ferry barge is inspected by the United States Coast Guard. She does 1 inspection every year. Basically, that's a paperwork inspection, that's a drills inspection, that's all of our safety gear inspection, and then once every 5 years, the Coast Guard has us haul the boat out to make sure that the hull is indeed seaworthy. We are by far a very, very busy ferry. We're operating from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, Saturday and Sunday, and then we're 6 to 6, Monday through Friday. Probably greater than 70% of our traffic are regular commuters. We'll get peak season 17,500 people using the ferry every month, and it's a pretty diverse crowd. It's doctors, it's lawyers, it's electricians, it's plumbers, it's nurses, college students, it's teachers. And the benefit to this ferry is if this ferry does not operate, it's a 45-minute detour to get from one side of the river to the other. It's 22 miles from one detour to the other. Our ridership is on the increase, primarily as Jessamine and Fayette County, as they move closer to the river with housing. And then you have people moving out of Richmond and basically into the countryside of Madison County. We're actually getting more ridership. When you look at the ferry as it's transiting the river, you're going to find something interesting, something that no other vessel in the American Merchant Marine fleet has. We fly two flags. We fly the flag of the Commonwealth of Kentucky and the Commonwealth of Virginia. Back in 1785, before Kentucky was even a state, the Valley View Ferry was operational. It was actually a military warrant from the Commonwealth of Virginia that established this ferry. And you look at it today, before you even get to the Commonwealth of Virginia, you have to pass through the state of West Virginia. When you look at 1785, that predates numerous states in the Union, numerous colleges. The ferry was open and operational before one of my colleges was even laid the first brick. The Valley View Ferry is rather unique in that it's a complicated propulsion system. We have diesel engines that run electric generators, that run hydraulic pumps, that run our hydraulic drive motors to turn the paddle wheel. We also have an electric air compressor. So it's a pretty complex startup in the morning. You got to bring everything online. Once you bring it online, you have to check for leaks. You need to check your propulsion forward and aft. And because we operate in the marine environment, once you bring everything up to temperature and you give the paddle wheel power, you need to be checking for things like hydraulic oil leaks. You know, it's nice to be historic and quaint and going back across the river, but you also have to think about environmental damage. It's not like a watch change on a tanker where you step onto the bridge, you check everything out, and it's a 15-minute turnover of the watch. You're up every morning at 4 a.m. You're driving to the ferry. On your way to the ferry, you got to check road signs. Make sure that indeed nobody's messed with them and dropped the signs indicating that we're closed. Once you get here, you got to check the bilges. Make sure that you haven't taken on any water during the night. Check the oils. You got to make sure that nothing's breaking. There's no wear and tear. If there is wear and tear, you need to be on top of it with the mechanics immediately. 0500, you're here for a 0600 opening, and then you're closing down at 1800 Monday through Friday or 2000 on Saturday and Sunday. We just don't shut her down and leave. There's paperwork to be done. There's releasing air pressure from the air system, checking to make sure there's no leaks or anything that have developed during the day. It's a pretty in-depth process, and if you want to protect your equipment, you can't rush that. Preparing for adverse weather on the ferry, it's a lot different than, say, preparing for a storm at sea, where you try to get sea room from any obstructions, or you do weather routing on a tanker. Here, you basically try to orient the boat to where the current has as little effect on it as possible. And then we have our guy wires. The downstream wires, you take those in as much as possible, and the reason for that is the downstream's wires are where you can get branches and debris hung up and create a big log jam that can put additional stresses on our four towers that we run our guide wires from. So you get that oriented, you check your bilges, you pump your bilges, and then you monitor how high the river's gonna come up, and you'll pay out cable, releasing the ferry farther into the river in anticipation for the river rising. So as you pay out cable, the ferry will back out in the river, but as the river rises, it'll actually come back in. And you're continuously paying that cable out until you reach a max level where it's not gonna crest anymore. On this river, we have situations where we get a rising river pretty rapidly. In the last 5 years, we've had 2 historic floods. When we get a flood situation on the river, we basically cable the boat to a line system and we pay it out enough to allow the ferry to rise with the river. 21 and 24 with historic floods. Towards the high water mark of those floods, we couldn't even get into the town of Valley View to get to the ferry. Everything was closed off. The boats on one side of the river, where the river bends, we basically don't get the majority of the rushing water. We get the flooding, but we don't get the heavy current. At that point, the boat is checked probably 8 times a day by the crew, just to make sure that everything is safe. We check the weather generally 3 times a day, and we're not just looking at what we have for our what we have locally. We're checking the forecast that NOAA does on Ford Lock, but also whether it be this ferry or a ship in the ocean, your best weather indicator is the guy to the west of you. We look a lot to the southwest to see what's going to happen. On this ferry, if storms are passing to the north of us, we're in good shape. If they're passing to the south of us, that's when we have to pay more attention, because what happens is we get a lot of river water coming down from the mountains, particularly the mountains in eastern Kentucky. We had a previous captain here, Dave Sanders. Probably the most notable thing I learned from Captain Dave Sanders was, don't ever take the river for granted, and know the difference between local water and river water. If it's river water, meaning coming down from upstream and from the mountains of eastern Kentucky, your current's going to be more in the center of the river. If you're going to be getting local water, it's going to be closer on the Jessamine, Fayette County side of the river, because what's happening is the Tate's Creek is going to be flushing and bringing a current into the river that's actually going to shift it. The other thing that I learned from Dave is what's under you can change because of the amount of flooding. That submerged tree that was 400 yards upriver is now directly under you because it got shoved down the river with the high water. Never take this river for granted. It can kill you. Unfortunately, we lost Captain Dave Sanders, and boy, when you talk about history, you lose a man like Dave Sanders, you lose a lot of river history. He'd forgotten more about this river than I'll ever know. Hopefully we learned enough from him to pass it on to the next generations of captains coming on. There were great captains before me. There will be great captains after me. Technology will never replace a man like Dave Sanders. We're coming to the end of the era on our current barge and our current towboat. While we have our feet firmly in the past, we definitely have to be thinking about the future and changing with the needs of the community. The boat that we're currently on, the John Craig II, it'll be in service until we get a new towboat, and we'll keep this boat as a backup for some time. Our old towboat, the John Craig I, that boat is actually going to the Point Pleasant Maritime River Museum in West Virginia. It'll be restored, and that boat will go to river festivals on the river because these are true paddle wheelers. Now the new boat will not be a paddle wheeler. It'll be a conventional screw propeller. The reason for that is faster transit times. Basically, while a paddle wheel is quaint, they're much more maintenance intensive. They are very specialized. The new boat, which will be a conventional screw propeller, will cut our transit times. Basically, what we're going to be looking at is keeping our feet firmly in the past, but we've got to take the new technology as this area grows and utilize it for shorter transit times. Thank you for joining us today on the virtual detour with the Bluegrass Trust. If you'd like to learn more, go over to bluegrasstrust.org.